So for green group math lesson 23, you'll need your textbook and your workbook, but we'll start in the workbook first, so have that ready. Also have your Notability set up for green math lesson 23. Okay, so starting out, we're going to be in the workbook for lesson 23, part 1. And what we have here is we have 3 columns. They're all number families that have a small number of 4. So what you're going to do is you're going to use your number sheet with your 4 so that you can add or subtract. Well, let's look at that first. So what we have to do is if we're missing a small number, think about it, S, small number, should we add or subtract? So small numbers missing, we need to subtract. So when we subtract, I'm going to think about the number that's not 4. I'm going to think about number 5 in my head, and then I need to count backwards 4 times. So I'm thinking 5, and then backwards 4, 3, 2, 1. So I'm going to put 1 here. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to think 6 in my head, and then my first countdown will be backwards 1. So 6, 5, 4, and so on. So what you're going to do is you're going to fill in all the numbers for column 1. You're going to fill all the numbers for column 2, and you're going to do the same thing for column 3. Once you're done with column 3, here is where you write in the subtraction fact. So let's do that one together. So only for column 3 here, you're going to write out all the subtraction facts. So the first one, I have 8. So I'm thinking 8 in my head. My first touch will be backwards because we're subtracting. So 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. So I know here that the number that I'm missing is 4, and when I have to write a subtraction fact, I have to work backwards down the arrow. So I'm going to start with my big number, subtract my first small number, equals the number that we figured out when we were counting backwards. So you're going to write the subtraction fact, 8 minus 4 equals 4. And you're going to do that for each of the ones in the third column here. Alright, so pause the video. You're going to solve for all these problems, and once you have them all filled in, come back for the next part. So for part 2 in the workbook, this is similar to what we did yesterday in lesson 22, is they've given you the dot here for 0, and they're telling you that you have to go down this arrow 7 dots. So when I'm counting that, I'm going to go, this is 0, this is not 1, this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So then I'm going to put a little dot there, to circle that one right there. And then going up this way, they've told us that we need to go up 5. So what you're going to do is you're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're going to put a circle around that dot. And then you have to figure out, because it's supposed to be a rectangle, where this corner dot needs to go over here. So once you have 1, 2, 3, 4 dots, then you're going to take your pencil and you're going to draw in the sides of the rectangle. Once you draw in the sides of the rectangle, don't forget to write your multiplication problem here. And also don't forget your unit, which needs to be squares. Okay, so pause the video while you work on that and then come back for the next part. So for part 3 in the workbook, all of these subtraction problems you're going to have to borrow, but what you have to figure out is, do I have to borrow in the ones column or do I have to borrow in the tens column? So you're going to have to borrow somewhere, but you just have to decide which column, either the ones column or the tens column. So make sure that you solve these very carefully and that you're borrowing from somewhere, but you have to decide which one needs to be borrowed. So go ahead and work on all 4 of these. Pause the video, and then once you are done, you are going to come back for part 4 in your workbook. Okay, so for part 4 in the workbook, we're doing some measurement, but we're not going to use a ruler. What we're going to do is we have to estimate how long in order to draw each line. So in A, you can see that this is A, B, and C. So A, they've given us a full line that's marked 3 inches. But you could see here that they want a line that's 4 inches, but they've only given us a little bit. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to make this line longer, and you're going to have to estimate, which means that you have to make your best guess as to how long 4 inches would be. So if I'm thinking to myself how long an inch would be, what you could do is if you look at your hand, the space from the tip of your thumb to the first knuckle, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second, is about an inch. So while you're looking at your finger, kind of like how I have my thumb out right here, I'm going to look that between the tip of my thumb and this first knuckle right here, usually that is a good estimate of how much about an inch is. All right, so as you're looking at that, mine obviously looks very small because it's in the picture here, but I know that somewhere in here is about an inch. So as I'm drawing my line, which is not going to be very straight on the iPad, but that's okay. So I know that if I go here, I've made it equal to 3 inches. So now I'm at 3 inches, but I know that I need to get to 4, so I need to go 1 inch farther. So when you're on your paper, you're going to have to bring it out 1 extra inch. So I'm going to estimate that my inch would end about there. So I've gone the 3 inches, and I've added my estimate of what the 4 inches would look like. So the same thing for B, they've given you 2 inches, you need to estimate how long it would be for 3 inches, all right? And the same thing for C. They've tricked you a little bit, they put this one on its side for 2 inches. So this one is also going to be 2 inches, it's just gonna go up rather than side to side. So go ahead and finish this section, make your best estimate as to how much more you're going to have to add onto your line. And if you need to look at your thumb while you're drawing, that would help out a lot too. So once you're done with that part, we're going to skip part 5 of the workbook. So once you're done here with part 4, then you're going to open your textbook to go to part 1. So now we're in the textbook for lesson 23 and we're at part 1. And first we'll read the instructions. It says to make a number family and then work the addition problem or the subtraction problem. So let's read A. A says the small numbers are B and 21. So I know from the instructions that first I have to make a number family. And we know that small numbers are ones that sit on top of the line. And big numbers go at the end of the line. Remember, we're pointing at them. They're so big, oh my gosh, we can't believe it. So we're pointing at the big numbers, which is going to go here. So first it says the small numbers are B and 21. And remember, we're starting to use letters to stand in for numbers that we don't know. So my 2 small numbers that are sitting on the line are B and 21. And then it says that the big number is 95. Okay, so now I've got a big number of 95, I've got a small number of 21, and I need to figure out what number is hidden for B. So if I know that B is a small number, I need to subtract. So then I set it up as a subtraction problem, starting with my big number. And 5 minus 1 is 4. Okay, so then I go back and I cross out my letter. And I know that B really stands for 74. So go ahead and finish these. Remember, small numbers sit on the line. Big numbers go at the end of the line. If you're having trouble remembering that, the other way that you can check it is if I put a number, let's say that I wasn't sure and I got these 2 mixed up and I put 95 on the line and I put 21 as the big number. The way that I can check myself is that if this is supposed to be a big number, I have a problem because 95 is bigger. So that means that I need to flip these because this number at the end of the line cannot be smaller than either of the numbers on the line. So make sure you're very careful because if you're not placing your big number and small numbers correctly, you're going to not know whether to add or subtract and we're not going to be able to get the right answer. So make sure to work slowly and carefully. Finish the rest of the problems in this section and then come back for the next part once you're ready. All right, so for this part, we're going to ignore the part where it says paired practice and you're just going to do this section on your own. And I want you to try and get a little bit quicker at knowing these math facts You can still use your number chart. I would like for you to use your number chart, but I want you to start getting a little bit more quick at knowing, okay, here's my other number 7, thinking 7 in my head, start counting forward because I'm adding, so 7 in my head, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, good, move on quickly, 9's in my head, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, right? So I want you to use your number chart, but we need to be starting to get a little bit faster with knowing what number to start with and whether we're counting forwards or backwards. So I want you to go ahead on your own and just work these problems, but try to push yourself to get to try to work them a little bit faster. You still want to be accurate, you still want to get it correct, but we want to push ourselves to know them a little bit more quickly. So once you're done here with part 2, what you're going to do is you're going to then get your work checked by a teacher. Make sure to show them your textbook and your workbook. They're going to show you what you got correct and what you need to go back and make corrections on. And once they give you the okay, then you can move on to your homework. Make sure to stop and ask for help if you need it.